author to kindly join in here on the dais. We also have with us the panelist, Shri Rajan Mathews, Director General COAI, Shri Rajesh Chharia, President ISPAI, Dr. Mahesh Uppal, Director ComFirst India, Shri Abhinandan Shekhri, Co-founder Newslaundry, Dr. Arvind Gupta, Head IT Cell BJP, Shri Damandeep Singh Soni, Head Line India, Shri Pankaj Sharma, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer, Uninor, Shri Apar Gupta, the advocate. Maybe please put your hands together for all the panelists over here. Please put your hands together. I would request the dignitaries to kindly be seated here on the dais. And in the meanwhile, the panelists are gathering over here on the dais. Let me please share with you that after the lunch, we are going to have a really interesting session on privacy and freedom of speech, its impact on internet governance, which will be embraced by Shri Manish Tiwari, Secretary, Foreign Affairs Department and former Union Minister, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, Shri Yashovardhan Azad, Information Commissioner, India, Shri Arun Mohan Sukumar, Senior Fellow, Center for Communication Governance, National Law University, Dr. Sambit Patra, National Spokesperson, BJP, Shri Somnath Bharti, MLA and Member, AAP, Srimati Karuna Nandi, eminent lawyer and Supreme Court of India, and Dr. Mrs. Usha Ramanathan, researcher and advocate. So I would like to request you all that after the lunch we are going to enjoy and get a very informative session on privacy and freedom of speech. So please do enjoy that. And before that, before the lunch also, we have this particular session on net neutrality. So please allow me to hand over the mic to Shri R. Chandrashekhar, IAS, former Secretary, Department of Telecom, Government of India, and President, NASSCOM. Please put your hands together for Shri R. Chandrashekhar.
We are waiting for Mr. Chandrashekhar. I think he should be here very soon. Should we continue to wait for him and then
yeah,
begin?
I think we should continue. In the meanwhile, he'll be joining us, sir. And I was not aware of the fact that he is not here with us till now. So within 2 minutes, we are going to start the session. Okay, Shri Thakurta is here with us, and he is going to moderate the session.
I'll tell you what
I have been given a whole confusion on the stage now.
What we could do is, since Mr. Chandrashekhar is not here, let's begin our discussion.
Yeah,
we are running only half an hour behind schedule. So if we stick to the schedule, you'll have lunch at about 2 o'clock. And if you want to have lunch a little earlier, then I have to request all the speakers on the panel to speak as little as possible. So normally when you ask a person to speak for 5 minutes, the person concerned speak for 7 minutes. So I'll request everybody to speak for 5 minutes. At the 7th minute, I shall interrupt you. What I thought we could do is we start the discussion. And we start looking, because there are so many issues. When you look at net neutrality in this, the host of issues which pertain to net neutrality in a global context, there are a series of very, very specific issues that have come up in the Indian context because of a recent consultation paper put up by the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, and there's been a considerable amount of debate and discussion about that paper. A particular company, Airtel, a scheme that it announced also raised a certain amount of controversy. The media is an important part of it. There's the Times of India which has started a campaign. So there's a lot that's happening. There are many, many dimensions to the issue. And at one level, some of these dimensions deal with what was discussed in the earlier session. At a bigger level, is it possible to govern the internet? Should it be governed? If so, how? I mean, at one level, those are the bigger issues. Is the internet like the highway? Can we can be compared to a highway, the information highway. Is it a public good? The whole issue of monopolies, oligopolies, if the internet is not owned by anybody and not controlled by anybody, then how does one preserve the neutral character of the net? I mean, how do we balance considerations of public good with commercial considerations of private players? So there are many issues and there are complex issues, and I'm sure the panel here will speak and take a nuanced view on the range of issues. So may I request Mr. Rajan Mathews, the Director General of the COAI, the Cellular Operators Association of India, to speak on the subject. And once again, I'll request all the speakers to try and confine their comments within 5 minutes. Please, sir.
Thank you, Paranjoy. I think, first of all, just a few points that we want to make with regard to net neutrality is to say that all of the operator community that it provides the services here vis-a-vis the network absolutely agree on net neutrality. And what that means is that we accept the fact that it needs to be open to everybody, non-discriminatory, and that we should not be in the business of throttling anybody in terms of accessibility to the internet. But that being said, we're saying is that please keep the definition of net neutrality as we go forward country-specific. Just yesterday, the EC has given its understanding of what net neutrality means, and so the debate is far from over. So rather than claim victory on net neutrality for India, I think we need to keep the debate open, minimalistic in terms of what is constituted in this, because the network is still growing, the internet is going. It's far too innovative and fast-paced to begin to think that we have a lock. So therefore, the issue of a minimalistic approach of definition should be appropriate. Next point we say is that it ought to be country-specific, and when we say it's country-specific, we have to undertake an examination of what it means to connect the next 1 billion to the internet and how that impinges upon the ability of the present network providers to continue to roll out the network to meet national priorities and national services that become incumbent vis-a-vis licensing conditions in terms of what that implies. One of the things that we've also said is that since several of the services that are being considered under net neutrality, since they are under license, what we have enunciated is the principle that same services must be conjoined by same rules. And so the implications of that need to be understood. And again, we refer to the EC mandate, which begins to start addressing some of that in terms of the European Commission. So I think that is an important consideration to have. The final point I'd like to make is that in the rest of the world, we have 5 networks. This is a point I've considerably spent time making, is that you have a landline network, you have a mobile network, you have a satellite network, you have a network of cable, as well as you have private networks that are government-owned for proprietary and secure networks. In India, you have one network, and that's the mobility network that is severely constrained in terms of spectrum and bandwidth. And if we are to go to broadband, those considerations and constraints need to be factored in terms of how we begin to incorporate net neutrality vis-a-vis network management. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mathews. That was very, very precise, very, very pointed. And I'm sure all the issues that he's highlighted would be taken up. The big issue is this issue of non-discriminatory. How does one ensure that the internet is non-discriminatory? And here we can go into a more nuanced view and look at different definitions of it. The other important point he talked about is how do you connect the next 1 billion? I mean, what he's hinted at is this whole issue of the digital divide that still exists. We have a planet with 7 billion people. It was only last year that 3 billion people, that number of people who'd used the net even once crossed that 3 billion mark. I read in today's newspaper that the number of SIM cards, the subscriber identity modules in India, is either near 1 billion or crossed 1 billion. That doesn't mean that there are that many mobile telephone users. I understand that figure is closer to about 700 million, but and we understand that of that number, possibly 200 or 250 million are people with smartphones. You know, I'm a not so smart person trying to use a smartphone, but so even within India, we have a huge set of issues that are there for us to handle and tackle. May I now request Mr. Rajesh Chharia, he's president of the Internet Service Providers Association of India, to speak on the subject.
Thank you, sir. Net neutrality. this word is a very hot word nowadays, and this hot has been taken over from the spectrum. Till last year, every telecom or the bureaucracy, we were discussing about the spectrum, pricing, regulation, lot of things. And from last 2-3 months, when the TRAI has come out with the consultation paper, this hot discussion is now the net neutrality. But if you see the whole game plan which is going on, it is not about the net neutrality. It is about defining the licensing condition of the telecom services. In a very simple word, the OTT communication provider are taking the shadow of the OTT content provider, keeping them in front, and just sending a misinformation into the public that they are going to be the licensed or they are going to be the controlled. It is unfortunate that 2-3 things has come together and the whole scenario has gone against that telecom service provider or the internet service provider just in 2 months. While from last 20 years, these companies are creating the infrastructure for our country, and the success story of our country, 900+ million mobile connectivity is there. Cheapest voice call in the world and fast penetration of mobile into the world. But still, we are very far from actual, because due to some information which we got that still 50,000 villages are there which are uncovered with any basic telephony. So our target, our objective right now should be how to connect those unconnected people, how to bridge this gap between the rural and urban so that the urban people stays in urban and the rural people, we can create the infrastructure, we can create the job, we can create the employment over there so that they should not run towards the city for anything and have a competition with the city youth or youngs. The discussion about the net neutrality and especially the discussion about the OTT communication, for which we are discussing among the panelists from a very long time, and every time into the discussion the same thing is coming. Same service, same rule, level playing field, regulation, fees, taxation. But one thing we are missing out, which is very prime for our country and which is very prime for us, the national security. By allowing this free communication, I am not saying that this free word should be removed or all this OTT player, communication player, I am not saying content player, should be brought under the licensing regime and start charging the fees, taxes, etc., which Indian telecom service provider or Indian licensed telecom service provider are paying in the tune of 30%, and obeying to the 40 to 70 regulatory actions which we take per year, while these guys are just skipping with everything. Why I'm saying that whenever the law enforcement agency or the security agencies demand anything from us for any data or any IPDR or CDR, and we are being given 10 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours for compliance. Even on the Holi, when everybody was celebrating Holi, we were getting the mail from our licensor that you have to block this website immediately and have to send the compliance within 4 hours or 5 hours. So this type of work we service provider have to do. We service provider have to create the infrastructure. We service provider have to create the bridge from the law enforcement agencies to our technical issue so that their compliances can be made. Why not this OTT communication provider? I'm just naming few. Skype, which is now Microsoft. WhatsApp, which is the biggest brand as per today's economic times. now Facebook, Google, Viber, why they are not interested in putting the investment into the infrastructure? Why they just talk about the garage innovation or any other thing rather than creating the infrastructure and just play the level playing field? Or in other words, I will say that the government of India is subsidizing Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Viber at the cost of the Indian ISP or the telecom service provider. And those ISPs who are into the deepest part of our village to provide the hand-on services to the user. Because in the city, we can use the internet very easily due to the language, but in the rural, that they require the hand-holding and that require a lot of effort. So if government of India is subsidizing all these players at the cost of the ISP, then it should not be there. Either they should pay the license fee, but we are not saying that they should pay the license fee. We should be removed from the licensing regime because already the government has gained a lot of money from the spectrum auction, and all these services which are now which are getting innovated at the garage should be made free. Then all the service provider in India should also be enjoying the same benefit or same privilege which a foreign unlicensed service provider are enjoying. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. He's given a perspective, and I'm sure there will be different opinions on the perspective, but what he's already said are fairly contentious. Everybody wants everything free, isn't it, sir? OTT, you want a free service. WhatsApp, you want a free phone service. Skype, video conferencing. From the perspective of the consumer, free is good. That's one view. He's talked about licensing conditions. He's talked about misinformation. He's talked about who invests in the infrastructure. And he's talked about how governments are, including the government of India, is indirectly subsidizing the biggest players in the business, the monopolists, the oligopolists, the cartel, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world. So, and he's also indirectly touched on the anomalies in the where the intermediary rules relating to the Information Technology Act are playing out. We know what the recent Supreme Court decision on Section 66A. So he's raised a series of questions. And I'm now going to request a person who has been studying this industry for many years, who's an expert on the subject. He's a director of his own company, ComFirst India, Dr. Mahesh Uppal, and I think he'll be able to give you perhaps a slightly different perspective on the issues.
Thank you.
1 minute, if I can just, we're happy to have with us here Mr. Chandrashekhar. He was supposed to deliver the keynote address, but I think it'll be a better idea if he now listens to what all the panelists say and give his concluding remarks on that. Is that okay with you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Let me also apologize for being slightly late because we were in a consultation with the Minister of Commerce and Industry on some policy matters. So apologies for that, but I'm happy. Thank you very much for putting me in the right place.
Okay, no. Okay, because if we hadn't, then people were faced with the prospect of not having lunch till around 2:30. So that's why. Please, Dr. Mahesh Uppal, please.
Thank you, Paranjoy. Welcome, Mr. Chandrashekhar and members of the panel, and ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to speak to you. My views on net neutrality are to some extent in line with what has been said, but to some extent will be a little different. And let me start with, the first point is, of course, that net neutrality is broadly a very, very sensible idea. Nobody could possibly have anything against it. The idea being that the person who, or the company, or the controlling or providing that infrastructure should not have any business in deciding how you use it. And so clearly an ISP should not have a say in how or why and when you use your infrastructure. There's very little that one can say against that in broadly. However, I think we would be very remiss if we were to not realize that the consensus on network neutrality is extremely misleading. And while it is at an emotive level, there is no doubt that we all, as I mentioned a moment ago, agree on network neutrality. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty, there are huge differences. And let me, for instance, point out to you, and one would expect, for example, that the telecom service providers to have a view which broadly says that, look, we build the infrastructure, so we should have legitimate expectations of making profits. And the content people have a view which says that historically you've not had a say and you should not be having a say in the infrastructure and its use. So those two positions are well understood. But I think what is not sufficiently known is, for instance, the founders of TCP/IP like Robert Kahn and Vint Cerf, who are formidable people in their own right, do not agree on network neutrality. They have opposing views. So anybody who says that it is inherent in the internet architecture that this should happen is clearly overstating that point. Similarly, economists routinely disagree on what network neutrality is and its benefits. Some of the most important opponents, quote unquote, or people with reservations about network neutrality and its the welfare that the consumer welfare that it brings are Nobel laureates. Beck, for instance, is a very respected person. Tirole, who got a recent Nobel Prize in economics, is not gung-ho about network neutrality, even though there are obvious sympathies people have about having access to unhindered access to internet. Same way, the people in, for instance, minority coalitions in the US are not particularly thrilled about it. They do have concerns that it might have implications for infrastructure and investment. Libertarians, for example, who celebrate the fact that the internet has actually grown through private enterprise, resent the idea that somehow this part of internet aspect has to be regulated by governments. That essentially what is being sought in network neutrality is that the government should now ensure that the internet remains free, and there are lots of people who see a contradiction in terms there. So clearly there are, and my point again is not to suggest that, to focus on people who you would not normally think have a different view. People who are not the usual culprits on either side. These are people in the middle, people with credibility, etc., etc. And furthermore, also recognize that even those who want network neutrality do not all agree in emphasis. For example, zero rating is okay for some people, but not for others. For instance, even the associations have significant number of people or significant players who do not agree. So I think to jump at a kind of a consent, at what appears to be a consensus would be a risky business. The second point I want to make is that the net neutrality, the way it has come about, has come about in the US context. We do know that there are 3 or 4 other countries which have network neutrality related legislation, and there are a few more countries which have some kind of rules about it, but it is by no means a majority of countries that have network neutrality in place as a legislative requirement, if you like. And it's also not the case that the US and the Indian situation are comparable. In fact, the US broadband is predominantly fixed line, and Mr. Arvind Gupta, who's both a technical person and has had long experience of the US situation, would, I'm sure, have something to say about that. The fact remains that the predominant mode of access in the US to internet is fixed line, whether it is cable or fiber. And in most cases, something that is not obvious at first sight, most of the internet access in the US is monopoly. That there is very little choice that most users of internet have although there is an increasing amount of choice or competition in the market, but by and large, where there is cable, there is less fiber, where there is fiber, there is less cable, and so on and so forth. So however, in India, the situation is quite different. In Delhi, you can access more players than you can probably access anywhere in the world. It may be a different point that you have issues about the network, etc. But you currently have close to 8 players in most markets in India. And not only are they all private players, as you know, there are government players. There are not only a single technology player, there is GSM, there is CDMA, there is, plus there are people who are not telcos, people who provide broadband access with fiber and various other technologies. So whether it is technologies, and similarly you have people who came to the networks 20 years ago and people who have just got licenses. So we have a very wide range of players, all of whom have entirely different incentives. So to suggest that all of them have an obvious incentive to collude or to create cartels, I think would be stretching it too far. So clearly we must be careful that we do not copy wholesale what happens in another country, in another context. But most important difference between India and the US is that our access, as Mr. Mathews also pointed out, is almost exclusively wireless. Close to 93% of India's users depend on wireless. And those that depend on wirelines also do so in offices. There are very few wireless users left at homes. Now, whether we like it or not, wireless, if we are dependent on it, then we need to worry about spectrum. And whatever else may or may not be the case, spectrum is a limited resource, and there is, for love or for money, you cannot actually add capacity if there is no spectrum there. So clearly there is a capacity constraint. Something which, again, contrasted with the US situation, where whether it's fiber or cable, if you have the money to invest, you can expand capacity to a considerable degree. And in any case, the capacity that fiber and cable offer you is several times more that broadband wireless offers. And remember also that India's own wireless markets are unique because we have more players and therefore a much greater level of fragmentation of spectrum than you would have in most countries of the world. So clearly, to suggest that in such a situation that we insist on a very, very crude and very, very rigid approach to net neutrality could be counterproductive in my view. And I think that is why, for instance, the NOFUN program, the National Optical Fiber Network, is so critical to the larger exercise in network neutrality. Because unless you have the capacity that is required to accommodate an exponentially increasing amount of traffic that we currently have on the internet, it is kind of naive to suggest that you can simply keep increasing capacity endlessly on one side and expect it to be accommodated on the other side with a limited, with where spectrum as well as bandwidth is limited. And the last point I will make, because the time is short, is this, that there is also another uniqueness in the situation as far as India is concerned. Nowhere in the mature regulatory regimes, whether it is US, Canada, or all of Europe, Australia, do you have any more a significant financial burden on telecom operators to offer services. The normal regulatory best practice the world over is that you pay for spectrum, you pay for it at market prices, you buy it in cutthroat auctions, etc., etc. But having acquired that, then the right to offer services, which is what the license is not there, is not something that you pay additional amounts for. And if you do, you pay a token amount, literally thousands of rupees, not even lakhs and crores. So the point is that you have a situation in India where there is a very significant additional cost to get the right to provide services in India. And that sum, ladies and gentlemen, is not a small sum of money. It is roughly 5,000 crores a quarter. So 20,000 crores, which is roughly over $3 billion US, is the price or is the cost incurred by operators for just the right to offer services, basically license fee and spectrum usage charges. And let me underline the fact that this does not include the price of spectrum, the 1 lakh crore or plus, for instance, that the operators paid, and it does not include the cost of equipment, which is legitimate cost which companies should bear. But there is an additional $3 billion, which nobody else pays, and therefore, just one. So I think the point that you are, so we need to ensure that when we are offering services of similar functionality, that the regulatory burden should be the same. The limited point, again in regulation, is that it should be technology neutral. If I'm offering the same service using different technologies, these services must be treated at par, which unfortunately in India are not, because as I said, all services other than voice over IP services pay a very significant $3 billion worth of fees for the right to do so. So I'll stop here and come back if need be.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh Uppal. Thank you for your views. He's added a far more nuanced, he's taken a far more nuanced approach to the issues. I mean, the phrase net neutrality, why it means different things to different people, why the situation in different parts of the world cannot be compared like the US and India. And I think at the end of the day, he's flagged this whole issue of spectrum. It's finite, it's scarce, it's a natural resource, it's a resource that belongs to the people of this country. We've had these series of scams, you know what that more than I regret to inform you, or I should say I'm proud to inform you that I was one of the petitioners in the 2G spectrum scam case. A lot of people laughed at us. When the Supreme Court cancelled 122 licenses in February 2012, many people also had a lot of views to say. But at the end of the day, we all agree this is very scarce, it's a national resource. How best to price it, how best to allocate it so that the public good is served. I mean, that's one of the issues I think Dr. Uppal has flagged. May I request media professional Abhinandan Shekhri, co-founder of Newslaundry, which is a website which has been critiquing the media, and let's have his perspective, which I think will be a little different from the ones from the speakers before. Please, Abhinandan.
Thank you, Paranjoy. It most certainly will. I just want to say that how we set up this debate is going to determine the outcome or the solutions. That it's complex, no one has a doubt. Yes, it is a very complex debate. There are no easy answers. There is an economic argument. There is the technical argument of the scarcity of spectrum, as has been articulated just before me. So we know that. I think that is established, and that is why this debate has been happening for so long. My objection with how it's been happening so far is that how you frame the question is going to determine the kind of answers you get. How you frame the problem will determine the solutions. And I just read Mr. Khullar's piece. I don't know if everybody in the panel has read it. He, day before yesterday, wrote a piece on this in a magazine called The Wire. My problem is that the implications in the larger context of justice is not the starting point of this debate. The starting point of this debate, as was articulated, is economic. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the most compelling reasons for not abolishing slavery in America at the time were economic. Economic reasons cannot be the reasons for policy. They can influence it, they can determine it, but economic reasons are never the starting point of policy. Social justice and natural justice is the starting point for policy. So I would appreciate if the entire net neutrality debate starts from there, and then we can go into the technical and economic reasons for it. So I think it's a flawed debate as far as the starting point is concerned so far. Secondly, it's a marketplace. I often see it being referred to as a marketplace. The internet is not the marketplace. The internet houses marketplaces. The internet is the ether we exist in, just like my voice is being carried to you by airwaves right now, as we go forward, my voice will be carried to you by spectrum. Today, I'm sure all of you pay income tax, I hope. You do it online because it's compulsory. And if you go overseas, you have to apply for visa online. You cannot say, I will not do it. It is not an optional service. If you do not have internet connectivity, you can get admission to the fanciest colleges. You want to set up a business overseas, you cannot get a visa. You cannot go stand in line, you have to go online. You want to file taxes, you have to go online. You want to book tickets, you have to go online. That it requires regulation, I don't think there is any doubt. How much regulation? So, any debate that says, yes, does it need regulation? Of course it needs regulation, but the question is how much? The financial world needs more regulation than, say, shoe manufacturers. Why? Because today, no matter what you pay, you have to go through the financial world. You cannot isolate yourself from that. That is why the financial world's regulations are different from someone who makes shoes. And often when I see spectrum being spoken of like a product, like shoes, we invested, so we have to get a return, you're in the wrong business then. This is not that business. Just like banking is not the same business as making chaat papadi. You cannot take the debate into that direction. Now, that was the starting point. Now, is this the right time to have this debate? That is another question that I've often seen come up. I was checking the figures online right now that India has 300 million internet users. Mr. Khullad in his piece said it has 200 million broadband users. So a very large chunk of India's population is not online.
It's 20 million.
20 million, sorry.
20 million.
And 30 million, what I checked right now overall, and 20 million according to Mr. Khullad's piece. So is it the right time to have this discussion when so many people aren't there? And because whatever decisions are taken now, or if it is put into a policy framework, everybody else is going to have to toe that line. So whatever policy framework we do execute, does it have a robust enough critical mass to determine the outcome? The percentage penetration in countries, I think the professor from IIM before this panel said, Brazil has taken the leadership role because the penetration is, as sheer the amount of people who are impacted by it, the population is way higher than it is in India. So I think that is another consideration that we must take into account. And like everybody said, every country has to have its unique solutions to its unique problems. So for us, that must be an important aspect, because only then will we see certain things that we may have overlooked right now. Certain problems when more people come online, we may have overlooked that this is how it impacts them. But if right now we frame the rules before, way more than half the people are online, I think the implications are massive, and we could miss a lot of things that would impact us in a very profound way, which right now we're just limiting to the economics and the technical aspects to it. And my 5 minutes are over, so I'll stop now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhinandan. Thank you for flagging certain issues. I mean, the point he's trying to make, whether you agree with him or not, is another issue, but it's that the solution to the problem will depend on the way you frame your questions. And he seeks to put right up front public good, social good. And I think the other point he makes is that spectrum is not footwear, right? Spectrum, if it can't be compared to that highway where pedestrians, cyclists, big trucks and fancy SUVs run, then is it closer to the air we breathe, the water we drink, the land that grows our crops? These are issues, and I think he's also flagged the issue of regulation. What kind of regulation? Heavy-handed regulation, regulation with a light touch. So let's get a glimpse of how the ruling party thinks on this subject. We have a technical person who's also the head of the Information Technology Cell of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Dr. Arvind Gupta. So let's hear his views on the subject, please.
Good afternoon. This is a debate that is a very important debate at a right point in time, because I think the Digital India program that the Prime Minister has launched is at its starting curve. And whether we achieve the billion people connected to the internet in India, a lot depends on all the stakeholders in this debate. And those are the telecom service providers, the internet service providers, the content providers. But I think where this debate is getting muddled is that we are, it's going always towards telecom service providers talking about spectrum, content people talking about content. And the essential piece of the puzzle we keep forgetting is the consumer. And you look at it from a consumer perspective is a view that nobody is taking. The debate has become all about business models, viability, about economics. But again, the consumer is very far away from that. The consumer wants internet that works. Consumer wants equal access to all content he or she wants to visit. So non-discriminatory access to content. The consumer also is of two natures. One is a consumer who is already on the internet, has a little bit of digital literacy, and the other is a consumer who will get on the internet. Now, I'll make 3 or 4 very viable points in the time that I have, but the first thing I wanted to flag off was that we have to look at it from a consumer point of view. Second issue is that I think this whole discussion about defining what are OTT applications and regulating them is something that kills innovation, something that does not support innovation. What in this world of digital, the definitions cannot be made, and even if they are made, they're going to be so short-lived. What you call today a marketplace, tomorrow will not exist. Policy and regulation will never keep pace with the speed of innovation and new technology coming up. We've seen that in the recent 6 months in India. People have not understood the concept. The policy, again, as I said, policy will not be able to keep pace with the Ubers, the Airbnbs of the world, the marketplaces of the world, and there are going to be tons more. So I think that we should not get into that debate. I mean, you talked about WhatsApp. I know we have a speaker from Line. Who thought they will start offering calling also? Everybody, this first started with the messaging, group messaging, P2P messaging, and suddenly they started offering calling. And that changes the paradigm. And the telecom, I believe a lot of this discussion initiated with Skype and WhatsApp calling becoming a lot more prevalent. And maybe that was the tipping point for this discussion to start happening. But the point being, today they're doing that, tomorrow something else will start getting offered. So regulation should not happen for all these things, and that will kill innovation. The third thing is, India does need its own definition. I really believe that. We cannot go by the European or the American version of what is net neutrality. And that I think will answer what some of my previous speakers have also talked about is, what is the debate? What is the question? Are we saying we don't want net neutrality, we are against without knowing what is net neutrality? And I will offer a simple explanation of what I believe should be there, and this is where I think a lot of debate should happen. That net neutrality should be a non-discrimination of access, means you should be able to visit any content that you want to visit and discover it. 2, you should be able to do it at equal speeds. So, Paranjoy talks about the highway. I always will equate it to a highway that, you should be able to go to any shop you want. It can't be that you only can go to a Haldiram and not to a Bikaner wala. So, if you're driving a car on a highway, it's public good, and it may be a toll road. So you may be on a slow road or a slightly higher speed road, a lane in that highway. But you have, you can go to any shop that you want to visit to. You can go to any mall. The highway does not restrict which mall you go to, and does not impose a discriminatory cost. That if you go to Haldiram, I'll charge you 100 rupees. If you go to Bikaner wala, I'll charge you 5 rupees. So that is a very important thing to understand. The driver of that car, which is you, decides where you want to go to, right? So no discrimination in access, no discrimination in cost, and no discrimination in speed. Just because you are going to a particular shop or a content, I will slow your speed down. You choose to be in which lane. The lane decides your speed, not the destination. Right? And that is the third point I would like to make. No discrimination in access, no discrimination in cost, no discrimination in speed. And the fourth thing is no discrimination in content. And this is a very important issue for digital democracies, digital governments, the way we have. That once you put out content, it is equally discoverable to everybody at the same speed. A lot of platform companies today throttle content. This is not done by telecom providers. This is, or the internet service providers, done by the platforms. And that is something essential for digital democracies going forward. You know, who discovers content? If you put a post out on Facebook, on Twitter, does everybody get it at, you know, every single person who's following that page or that person get it at equal speed and in equal time? Because if critical posts get throttled, it may affect democracy. So that's the fourth aspect of it. Again, in the interest of time, all this debate has to keep in mind the digital inclusion. And that is definitely a very important aspect to it, the Digital India program. Now, that if the explanation offered is that we will not be able to reach to 1 billion Indians because we have limited you know, capacity, I think is a wrong argument. The fact is, people will discover new things, new ways of doing things. A lot of people came onto the internet because they wanted to be on a Facebook or a WhatsApp. That's why they started using data plans. So I think content is always king. And that is a fundamental rule that we've seen on the internet. People have discovered new content. People have gone to the internet because they started you know, liking the content, learning education from there, taking you know, classes there, and that's the reason they've been on that. So that inclusion will happen because there is good content to be discovered, not the other way around. Right? And the last point I will make is I think to balance this whole debate is that there is definitely a consideration of national security that we need to bring to the debate. That if, which is a genuine concern of everybody here, that if there is all these, especially the calls, the voice over IP calls, if they need to register themselves somewhere before offering it? Because if they are not, then it does bring about an issue of national security. So, but I think that's a separate debate from net neutrality. It cannot be confused with net neutrality. Also, a lot of times, this taxation issue.
We can't, you know, we can't look on the issues in, you know, I mean, what should I say? You have to take a holistic view. There are different sets of debates relating to the economics, the technological aspects of it, the national security aspects. But what he has underlined again and again is the issue of consumer interest, the issue of inclusion. He's repeatedly said this whole point, that means policy and regulation cannot keep pace with innovation, but that doesn't mean that you won't have policy or regulation. You still need that, however fast or however slow you do it. And this whole issue of what he says, non-discriminatory access, cost, speed, content. So, okay, he's flagged quite a few points, and time alone will tell whether his government will be able to, you know, roll out its plans and make the internet, you know, truly an inclusive, socially, politically, economically. We now have Shri Damandeep Singh Soni. He heads Line India. Can we have your views on the subject?
It was quite heartening to hear what Dr. Arvind Gupta had to say. Really positive words. For me, net neutrality means three things: open network, no throttling, no discrimination. And it's as simple as that. But if we overlay this with the three stakeholders who get impacted by net neutrality, who have a key role to play, that's the operators, the telecom providers, the ISPs. On the other side, there is the OTT players, folks like us, content players, and then the most important of them all, the consumer. Things start getting a bit, you know, fuzzy. But if we keep the important point in place, and we say, okay, we're going to, change one of the three variables, the open network, the no throttling, or the zero discrimination, you impact two important parameters. One is the pace of innovation. When line as a service started, we didn't know we were going to do all these things today. Today, folks like us, like WhatsApp, we have a lot of users, and we say, okay, fine, how more can we add value to the consumer? Let's bring payments into the foray. Friends send money to others. So, the platform lends itself very well for payments, and that's something I know the government's also trying to solve by opening up the new banking regime. Let's try to solve the problem of transportation. Let's try to make sure that, there's an app which is ubiquitous in every phone. Can we enable them to, book a cab, book a flight, or book a train? So the amount of services just keep on increasing. Where we are sitting today, the pace of innovation is pretty rapid. And I don't know where we're going to go, because there are multiple options available for us in terms of both services and also content, and and both entertainment content and serious content. So if we try to change any of these variables, the pace of innovation gets impacted. I heard one of the gentlemen say that we also have to invest in infrastructure, but like one of the panelists said in the earlier debate, that internet exists in layers. There are the infrastructure players, there are the access players, there are the content players. There's no vertical integration across all these layers. It doesn't exist today if the layers did not exist. Each party plays a role to it for the whole service to exist for the consumer. So asking the OTT players to also invest in infrastructure is, I think, a bit unfair, because the way we look at innovation is to solve a different kind of a problem, not the infrastructure problem. There are people who can do that. The debate has essentially risen in the recent days because of some of the services that we've gotten into. But let me ask you this. So if this debate is completely economic in nature, how it originally started off, what if tomorrow the telecom operators decide to get into cab booking? Do they want, because fine, right now into calling, and they had an option to innovate to make messaging ubiquitous. They invented they had the monopoly for SMSs. They didn't innovate. The innovation came from the OTT players. Although the telecom operators did also have the data pipe with them. So tomorrow, if they plan to get into transportation, do we start saying, okay, we want the Ubers of the world also to subscribe and pay a tax to the operator because the operator wants to get into it and because they're investing into infrastructure? No. Each player here plays a part. There are certain constraints because we are a growing economy. We have a lot more people to get onto the internet. But because of these constraints doesn't mean that we mix that up with the net neutrality debate. And there are constraints based on spectrum. There are constraints based on taxation. We can be innovative about how we go about these whole things, but we should not overlay these two problems with the net neutrality problem. There's a couple of points more that I want to make. The answer to net neutrality in India is not going to be minimalistic in nature. We are a growing country. We have very different problems. We have this whole rural India who doesn't know what Facebook is. We have the urban India who's totally connected with the social network. We have to balance the two. We have to bring connectivity to 1 billion users. And the last point that I'd like to make is about security. Fair enough, we are into services like voice, and we need to subscribe to whatever the government asks us in terms of compliance. But some of the comments that I hear in the papers today is that of the servers being placed in India. I mean, it doesn't work like that. That's my 5-minute call. So that doesn't solve a problem. The problem of compliance does not get solved by just placing the physical infrastructure within the country. There are various means of going about it. There are various softwares available. There are various processes that can be changed to meet the security. And again, that's one problem we should not bring into the net neutrality debate, because that's an entirely different one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a bit like, I just heard a word the other day, Tor. The onion route. Onion. It's like one layer after another layer, after another layer, after another layer. The only problem is, sometimes it makes you weep. It's, tears come to your eyes at the end of the day. You're trying to understand there's so many layers and so many aspects to this debate and discussion. Thank you so much, Mr. Soni, for your contribution. We have another presenter, Mr. Pankaj Sharma. He's Chief Corporate Affairs Officer of Uninor, which is a telecom service provider. Let's hear what he has to say, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. Gupta raised a very important point regarding consumers, that, who's worried about consumers. And he also made another important point. Policies can't keep pace with the way the technology is really developing and all that. So, I think we are all operating in this country in the free market. And what is the best protection for consumers? It's the competition, right? Uninor is owned 100% by Telenor worldwide. So I would like to bring some global perspective into how markets are operating and what's happening in India. So we do have operations in Europe, in Scandinavian and Central and European countries. We do have operations in Asian countries, and then of course in India. In most of the countries outside India, Telenor is a significant player. We are either number 1 or number 2. And in India, we are small, but I would say we are solid. We compete very, very fiercely in this marketplace with other operators. And I can tell you that intensity of competition in this market is very, very fierce. And to me, that is what protects the consumers in India. There have been a lot of discussions. Our friend raised some very important points. Spoke about slavery and social justice and all that stuff. There have been a lot of points trying to say that telecom operators, they're trying to control the internet. Now, I'm not sure who can control the internet. Maybe in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, you find some governments trying to control internet, and we all know what happened. That was somewhere happening in Middle East. We found most of those governments were changed. They were thrown away. We also have an example in our northern eastern neighbor, China. They've been a little bit successful in terms of trying to control internet, but all we know is past 18 to 24 months, their growth rates are coming down, and India is going to take over them. So that is the power of internet. Thankfully, we have smarter politicians. Mr. Gupta sitting over here, we don't have such challenges in India. I think the whole debate that is happening over here is more about, there is no clear definition. And since I think there is no clear definition, there are no boundary lines which have been defined, there are no references which are there, and that is why there's a whole lot of a confusion. I think Rajan mentioned, Mr. Uppal mentioned, we all support net neutrality. Let us define some loose boundaries. We don't have to define regulation, but maybe, if we have some sort of a reference around it, maybe that will serve good. Now, FCC did come out with some reference points in February this year. Mr. Gupta spoke about it. We are all in favor of there should not be any blocking. We all say that. There should not be any throttling. There should not be paid prioritization. I don't think anybody is against it. Mr. Uppal spoke about that it's a wireless network. In India, we do have, even if, let's forget about, spectrum price and all that. I mean, spectrum is limited in this country, so there is some traffic management which is required. There is a lot of discussion around some tariff plans and all, but once we have this reference that gets defined, I'm sure we have TRI who will take care of it, in terms of if a particular tariff plan is not falling in that reference points, I'm sure TRI can take care of it. So that is where I will end. I think we are all in favor of net neutrality per se. Let us define some loose boundaries around it, some reference point around it, and then we can all take it forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pankaj Sharma. I think the point that he's made is net neutrality is one of those words we all love. Everybody loves net neutrality. It's like Jan Dhan Yojana and Swachh Bharat. It's like motherhood and apple pie. We all love it. The only point is, as we repeatedly say, who defines it? How well do you define it? How accurately do you define it? How precisely do you define it? Can you do it? Difference between India and China. 1 out of every other person in China is using the internet. 1 out of 5 persons in India is using the net. And I'm not even suggesting, I think the unanimous opinion is that we can't borrow models from different parts of the world. We have to develop our own unique systems. Okay, we have with us here a lawyer, an advocate who studied issues in great depth. He was one of the important people arguing in the Supreme Court, and 66A is now no more with us, and I'm very happy to invite Apar Gupta to speak.
Thank you, Paranjoy, for that generous introduction. I would like to thank ASSOCHAM for having me here. Now, mentioning my background as a lawyer, and somebody on the panel also mentioned Article 14 and equality, what does it mean? Now, even today, we are having debates of equality which are inherent to the network neutrality debate. And Article 14 by itself, at some point of time, was thought to be a mere guarantee of formal equality, that all of us should be treated the same. However, the Indian judiciary over a period of time recognized that it means substantive equality, which is essentially that people who are situated differently can be treated differently as well, if it serves a reasonable purpose and leads to a social good. So with that kept in mind, I would say that the definitional problem we are dealing with network neutrality will keep on arising and will be one which will be based on constant dialogue between different stakeholders. At the same point of time, I would like to say that certain key principles which have been articulated by various people on this panel, as well as throw up differences in terms of their application as well as nuance, however, go towards a certain sense of agreement that some regulatory oversight is required over network neutrality at present. Before proceeding to that, I would just like to take a minute and touch upon the other aspect of the TRAI consultation paper, which deals with licensing of services on the internet. Now, with respect to licensing of services on the internet, there is a silos which is made between communication services such as WhatsApp, which can provide you voice over internet calling now, as well as instant messaging, and services which are pure internet services and platforms, in the sense something like a Facebook or Google, which is not doing that. However, this binary by itself, if you're looking at it, is slowly getting closed incredibly fast. Most online services to some degree do provide communication services. Moreover, there are different blends of internet applications and platforms. For instance, let's take the auction platform, Quicker, which also offers the service between different buyers and sellers and connects them and allows them to chat. And will such a binary hold true for such services? And if there's a regulatory burden placed on an internet application or service which does provide the connection between a seller and a buyer, will that prevent such social benefit for flowing to an internet user? These are things to be considered. And it also poses the larger problem, which is that there is no such clean binary by itself. Now, coming to other considerations which do arise for pure communication services, for let's say, instance Skype, there are two main ones which do arise. The first is national security and data localization. Mr. Arvind Gupta has quite clearly said these are important to all of us. However, this is also a distinct debate. Why are we bringing this in with respect to network neutrality? If we bring in more and more aspects, more and more distinct interests, and bundle them into network neutrality, the debate, which is already complex, nuanced, will get burdened under its own weight. There is no dispute with the fact national security is important. State interests should be served. However, is it better formed through a dialogue which is premised on privacy of users, as well as on the basis of data localization needs of different kind of services? I think that's something to be taken in mind. And whether the Ministry of Communications is the right nodal agency to take this forward, or it should be a multi-ministry group, such as being led by the Ministry of Home. These are issues for all of us to think about. Also going by what we also hear quite often is the slogan of same service, same rules. And I do agree to some extent there is a degree of legitimacy in this argument, especially when given that telecom players pay a high amount of license fees yearly. In that respect, I do agree, maybe regulatory burdens on them are too high, but placing those same regulatory burdens on internet applications and services may not justify any interest. Is it simply imposing a regulatory burden for the sake of imposing a regulatory burden, if it's not even serving an interest by itself? Should we look at, in terms of solutions towards decreasing a regulatory burden on an industry which has it to a degree which is burdening it, or should we place it on other industries as well? So I think that's one way to think about it. In terms of network neutrality, and coming to it finally, I would say that when we say it's no blocking to block certain contents and to preserve user choice, one phrase which we often hear is network management services. Now, network management services by itself presume that technical protocols within all these systems will determine what flows and how the traffic flow is done. Does a distinct service require low latency for service to a user, etc. These things are important. And again, in designing these protocols, there should be a high degree of transparency as well as a process which can audit as well as make sure that these are done on the basis of trust. It should be open. It shouldn't be left to a service provider or technical protocol to degrade services without any purpose by itself. Coming back to the larger point, we need regulatory oversight. In terms of throttling, which are creating fast lanes or slow lanes, that's already happening. So, you know, when people say no throttling, it essentially means that A provider will not be given faster access than B provider if they have the same service, and that's already being done. So I do not know where the agreement does lie here. Also coming to transparency, which is properly a concern, where the service provider, which is the ISP, bundles content along with it, we need greater levels of transparency. All A, B, C need to be done with regulatory oversight. Finally, coming to differential pricing, which is the most contentious aspect, which also brings dispute between internet firms by itself, and differential pricing means essentially zero-rated services. Do we need to see it as a proper function of competition law or regulatory oversight? Again, needs more conversation. In terms of solutions, I would say that there is a need to delink. We don't need to bundle every and each interest with respect to internet here. Privacy, lawful interception, internet governance are larger debates. We can have them. Network neutrality is important. Let's focus on that. Secondly, every interest needs a proper articulation as to what we have to achieve. Finally, there are different stakeholder interests. We all need to recognize that. As a lawyer, I understand the limits of adversarial argument, and here there is a greater need for a much more calmer sense of dialogue to be followed. In this respect, again going back to the TRAI chairman's article, which was published 2 days ago, recognizes the need for regulatory oversight, also says we need a pragmatic way out. I hope that we can have more forums to discuss this and take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Apar. That was a very, very, very cogently argued point from a person with a legal perspective. I mean, he says we have to discuss, and this discussion has to take place with a certain amount of equanimity, with calmness. It is a very, very complex issue. And what Apar has pointed out is that, you know, because it's so complex, people obfuscate, people confuse. And there is need for greater transparency in the discourse. There's greater need for regulatory oversight. After hearing him, I'm reminded of one of my favorite songs from the 60s, Bob Dylan, My Bag Pages. The last lines, good and bad, I define these terms as if so clear somehow. But I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. Between you and lunch now stands the person who was supposed to be the first speaker. And he is a person who has a huge amount of experience, unlike many of his predecessors who ended up becoming chairman of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. Mr. Chandrashekhar has joined, is the executive head of NASSCOM, which is the National Association for Software and Service Companies, and he's seen it from both sides. I mean, he's seen it, he's a good generalist, he's a good IAS officer, Secretary, Department of Telecommunications, and now with an industry body. So to round up this very, very interesting, very, very enlightening panel discussion, over to you, Mr. Chandrashekhar.
Thank you so much, Pranay, for making it clear that I'm the only barrier between the audience and lunch. And I'm acutely aware of the limitations of being in that position, so I won't be long, lest you decide to have me for lunch instead. But, you know, on this whole debate, as a person who has spent a number of years in IT and in telecom, and having seen it through the eyes of the stakeholders in each of these segments, I must say that, I feel that in a situation like this, it reminds me of a politician who was placed before an audience which was equally divided on a highly contentious issue, and he was asked to give his opinion to that audience. And the politician got out of it by saying, half my friends are for it and half my friends are against it, and I want to be absolutely clear that I am for my friends. I can't do that, because I'm not a politician, nor do I have those skills. But you would have seen, as you heard all the different panelists speaking, that the debate on net neutrality in India has been a little bit like, Henry Ford and the motor car. All of you would know the story where he said you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And so today everybody says, all of us, we want net neutrality as long as you define it the way I want it to be. And that, I think, is not really very helpful, because we have now moved away from saying whether we should have or should not have net neutrality, and instead got into a debate on how do we define it, which is actually paraphrasing the same problem. I think that as look at the issues, and I think it was rightly brought out by Abhinandan and indirectly by many of the speakers, that how you define the problem also sort of decides where you get, and it also in a sense indicates the thinking. So one of the reasons why I think the TRI consultation paper brought about such a shrill response was also because of a perception that the problem definition itself was coming from a very different angle, and leading the whole debate in a very different direction, which was that the telecom sector has a problem, and how do we solve that problem in terms of the issues which have come up in the revenue streams and in terms of viability. And somehow in the midst of all of these issues, I think there is a perception, not stated in so many words, but perhaps felt at some level, that this is a kind of a battle between IT and telecom, and only one of them can be left standing. And I think that that type of thought process is something which is certainly not going to be helpful for a country like India, irrespective of who is left standing. That's going to only worsen our problem. And both are important, and I don't need to explain why, but nonetheless, very briefly, we are today at maybe, overall with nearly 900 million subscribers, or at least 600 million individual users, we have well past the 50% mark in terms of usage. We are at a much lower level in terms of broadband coverage. But we clearly have a long way to go in terms of enabling everybody to have reliable broadband coverage. So clearly, for us to say that this is a right for everybody cannot be sustained without taking into account the fact that we still have to reach a large number of people, and that can only happen through the telecom sector, which is more than 90% in private sector hands, and therefore the continued viability of that sector is a critical part of the digital dreams that the country has and that the government has put before us. Equally, even though technology today has become extremely powerful, especially with the social media, mobility, analytics, cloud, Internet of Things, nanotechnology, and so on and so forth, I do believe, based on all that I've seen and experienced, that merely applying these technologies in India is not going to solve all our problems. We will also need to combine it with a liberal dose of innovation. And that's also something which comes from the sector, and that's something which increasingly is an important part of the whole IT industry. And any shackles that we put on this kind of innovation, whether in the adoption of technology through innovative business models or in the innovation in technology, by putting curbs on such technology. And you would recall that mobile in India did not start till 1994, because for nearly a decade we were racked by this debate on what will happen to security if you have mobile. So, you know, this tendency to look at technology saying how do we, you know, first deal with all the attendant issues before we can even bring it in, is a different mindset altogether. You know, policy discussion, as I was mentioning with the minister on FDI in commerce, where the debate was, should we allow FDI in e-commerce? Because what will happen to, you know, all the, this group or that group? The fact of the matter is that all of these technologies today are disrupting every sector. They are disrupting, you know, banking, they are disrupting healthcare, they are disrupting customer relationship, they are disrupting retailing. Name the sector and the disruption is happening. In most of those sectors, the sectors impacted don't have the luxury of discussing whether they should or should not be disrupted. It's happening. But in telecom, there is a question, because telecom happens to be the medium which is offering services which is disrupting itself, and therefore this debate becomes possible. So the question is, and is there a way to reconcile all these different you know, objectives that we have been talking about? Again, Abhinandan mentioned about rights, the economics of it was brought out, the technical aspects were brought out, and Mr. Arvind Gupta talked about so many different dimensions of you know, policy and regulation. But can we frame it in such a way that how do we ensure that these two essential elements of the digital revolution reinforce each other rather than work at loggerheads with each other? And that's the way that we have tried to look at it. And I believe that it is possible. And it is possible when people really sit down and take a cold, hard look at things. In a world where voice has more or less plateaued, where voice revenues are dropping because, not because people are talking less, that doesn't happen in India, can never happen, but because the realization from voice is going down because of either cannibalization or alternative ways of doing it. And data is going up by leaps and bounds. I don't entirely agree with our friend who said that people in rural areas don't know about Facebook. It's quite amazing. Ask all the telco operators what the rate of growth of data in the rural India is and how much of it is coming from, you know, WhatsApp and Facebook and all of that. So how do you actually use this force as a positive force rather than say, you know, how do you stop it? And I think that there are ways, and India could be the first country actually to adopt policy which actually tries to harmonize these two. And I entirely agree with the comments made by many of the speakers that you cannot just pick up a model of some other country and then force fit it in India, because we have to see it with reference to the stage of development of our telecom sector, the stage of development of our IT sector, and even more importantly, what are the economic objectives and social objectives that we have set before ourselves, and how do we use this most powerful segment of the modern world to achieve those objectives. I believe there is a way, and hopefully this debate will lead us in that direction. There are many arguments that have been put across. There are a million responses, so I'm not even going to try and get a mean between the two. But I believe it's vitally important to find a constructive definition which actually harmonizes these elements and helps us to move forward. And more than that, I believe it's possible. It's not a dream. It's not a. It's not just a wish or a motherhood statement. It can be done. There are ways to do it, but we will have to figure out the path to reach that destination. And there are many challenges involved. I'm sure that we can do that. I do hope that events and discussions like this will help us to move in that direction. So thank you very much. And I assured you that I won't stand long between you and the lunch, and I hope I've kept my promise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandrashekhar. You know, he started his presentation by saying he's not a politician. But then he said something which all politicians say. Politics is the art of the possible. As a former bureaucrat and technocrat, he says, yes, it is indeed possible. Many things are possible. And this discussion hopefully will contribute towards realizing those possibilities and that potential. I too will not stand between you and lunch. We started half an hour late. We are about 32 minutes running behind schedule. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give all the panelists a big hand. It's my honor, my privilege to moderate this panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
They're here to discuss with you informally. I'm sorry there's no Q&A session, but you can talk to them informally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite you all for the lunch, and I would like to bring that into your notice that right at 2:30 we are going to start our valedictory session, in which we will be joined by Shri Manish Tiwari, Dr. Sambit Patra, Shri Somnath Bharti, Shri Arun Mohan Sukumar, Shri Yashovardhan Azad, Srimati Karuna Nandi, and Dr. Mrs. Usha Ramanathan. Please do have your lunch, and we'll start the valedictory session at 2:30 right on. Thank you so much.
The heart of the problem is that voice doesn't require a lot of data.
To this wonderful conference on India Internet Governance Summit 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, today as we are exploring many more aspects of Internet governance, then I must share with you that most of the time we have heard people saying that privacy is the cost of being on internet and we have to pay for it. How true is that? For that particularly, we have this valedictory session which will be focusing on privacy and freedom of speech, its impact on internet governance. For that, I am very delightful to share with you that we have with us eminent personalities over here. We have with us Shri Manish Tiwari, Secretary, Foreign Affairs Department and Member, Research and Coordination Department, Indian National Congress, and former Union Minister, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India. Please put your hands together for him. I would request you, sir, please be here on the dais. I would also like to invite on the dais Shri Yashovardhan Azad, Information Commissioner, India. Please put your hands together for him as well. Shri Arun Mohan Sukumar, Senior Fellow, Center for Communication Governance, National Law University. I would also like to invite you on the dais, sir. Please welcome him with your round of claps. I would also like to invite Dr. Sambit Patra, National Spokesperson, BJP. Please welcome him with your round of claps on the dais. I would also request Shri Somnath Bharti, MLA and Member AAP, to please be here on the dais, and let's welcome him with your round of claps. I would also request Srimati Karuna Nandi, the eminent lawyer from Supreme Court of India, to please be here on the dais, and we welcome you, ma'am, with a round of claps. Srimati Karuna Nandi. I would also like to request Dr. Mrs. Usha Ramanathan, researcher and advocate, to please be here on the dais on the panel. Please welcome her as well with your round of claps. Friends, as this session is going to focus on the privacy and freedom of speech, which is a very important subject while we are on the internet, while governance is on the internet, while we are being governed. So for this particular session, as we all know that we have the eminent personalities here on the panel, so I would like to request the session moderator, Senior Fellow, Center for Communication Governance, National Law University, Shri Arun Mohan Sukumar, to please take over the mic. Please welcome him with your round of claps.
Thank you everyone for being here. We have a lot of very important people here and very little time to hear them and then hopefully have a panel discussion where the audience have an opportunity to interact with them, because from what I hear from the earlier panels, we were facing a time crunch of sorts. So hopefully My request as a moderator of this panel is for the panelists to keep their introductory remarks brief, and then we can follow that up with Q&A with the audience and a robust panel discussion after that. So